Welcome to the bonus story. This story is a little bit long, but I was fascinated when I found it, and I thought it's kind of long, so I'm just going to read this story and let you decide if you thought it was as fascinating as I did. This is mid-1800s, and as you hear, it's going to pick up where the author of the book meets up with an old friend that he served with in the cavalry, Arizona, during about mid-1800s, right in there, maybe right after the Civil War, late 1860s. But I hope you guys enjoy it. It's just another real story that proves how mad the Wild West really was. And not only mad, but sometimes kind of cool. In the mountains of Santa Cruz, I met an old friend whom I have not seen in years. He was crossing the mountains like myself on horseback and would gladly bear me company as far as the western border of the valley of Santa Clara. What had he been doing since he drifted out of my sight for some years before? As we rode through the forest, he told me little by little the story of his later life, the main event in which impressed me deeply. As he told me the story then and there, I will now relate to you. The long, hot September day was drawing to a close at last, and the fierce sun of the desert sinking down on the horizon in Arizona, when our little group would round the bend in the trail, and we sighted a little adobe enclosure, half fort, half corral, called by courtesy the station, near Pico on the old overland road between Tucson in southern Arizona and the Pima villages on the Gila. We had left the upper valley of the Rio Grande too early in the season by a month at least, and our trip thus far on the road to California had been a hard one. The coarse, dry bunch of grass, never abundant on this route, was unusually scarce that summer, and as we were forced to guard our animals night and day to prevent a surprise and capture by the Apaches, they got scarcely enough of it to keep life within them. We were hurrying on as rapidly as possible for the Gila, where we could purchase corn fodder and barley from the friendly Indians and propose to camp for some time and recruit our worn-down stock before turning westward toward the Colorado and the Pacific coast. As we were unpacking that evening on the road, I missed a package containing a valuable set of mathematical and drawing instruments and some important papers which I could not afford to lose. They had been put with other articles on the pack mule in the morning, but having been carelessly corded and tied, had worked loose and fallen off on the road without being noticed. Finding I could borrow a fresh horse at the station, I determined to ride back up the trail in the cool of the evening, preferring to trust the chances of being captured by the Apaches to losing the package. The night was clear and the full moon lighted up the landscape so that everything of any size for miles around was almost as distinctly visible as midday. I had ridden at a gallop some 10 or 12 miles when I saw the package laying beside the road under a scrub mesquite tree, which had raked it off as the mule ran under it. Dismounting, I secured the package upon my back of my saddle, and having tightened the cinch, was just mounting again for the return to the station when my horse gave a loud snort and jumped backward. Looking up the road toward Tucson with staring eyes, nostrils inflated, and ears picked sharply forward, I knew what this meant in Apache land, and was on his back in an instant and rode out into the open space beyond the reach of arrows, which might be shot from behind any shrub or rock. Death haunts your steps day and night in the land of blood, and man and horse acquire habits of the most intensive vigilance. Looking up the road in the direction indicated, I saw something moving along the trail, about a fourth of a mile distance, which looked like a small boy. Proper caution would have prompted me to turn and ride straight back to the station. But just then I remembered that we had seen some distance back upon the trail the footprints of a human being, apparently those of a little boy in the dust of the road, and noticed that they finally left the track and turned away from the road and into the chaparral. There were no other footprints with them. And this fact in such a locality had caused us to indulge in considerable speculation and conjecture as to who had made them. Remembering all of this, my curiosity was excited. And after a few moments' hesitation, seeing the object, whatever it is, had stopped and crouched down, having apparently noticed me just then for the first time. I rode cautiously up the road toward it. I had reached within 10 or 15 rods of the object when it sprang up and darted in the chaparral. And as it did so, I saw what appeared to be a young Indian dressed in a Mexican costume, loose shirt, wide pants of cotton goods, and a broad sombrero. All was quiet for a moment, and then I called out in English, "Who's there?" There came no response. I then repeated the question in Spanish. A little, weak, frightened voice replied in the same language this time. "Only a poor Christian, senor. And you are not Apache?" "No, I am a friend," I replied. "Thanks be to God, I'm saved," was the devout response. And the little fellow ran out from his hiding place, and coming directly up to me, seized my hand and covered it with kisses, praying and uttering thanks and crying hysterically all at once. He was a boy of apparently 12 or 13 years of age, small and slender, and dressed in clothes much too large for him. It took me some minutes to get anything like a connected account of his troubles from him, but I finally gathered that he had been on his way from a part in Mexico around Sonora to Los Angeles in California with a party of Mexican friends consisting of a man and his wife, another boy, and 2 others. They had turned out from the road to camp where there was some grass, and while preparing for the night, they had been jumped by the Apaches and all shot down but himself. He had happened to be a few yards away from the camp when the attack was made, and concealing himself, had escaped detection. The Apaches had only remained at the camp after committing the massacre but a few minutes, being evidently afraid of having drawn the attention of some stronger party by the firing, and after scalping their victims, rode away in haste upon the captured animals. The poor boy had wandered away from the road, in his terror and despair, and for 3 days had been traveling around at random, endeavoring to regain the trail, or discover a station where he would find shelter and protection. Late that day he had found the trail and followed it several miles, but becoming faint and exhausted from long exposure and the want of food, he had turned out to lie down for a rest under a tree, and having fallen asleep had missed us entirely as we passed only a few hundred yards from him. He had found water once and had eaten a few mesquite bean pods, which had fallen in his way, thus sustaining life. His clothing was torn to shreds by the thorny shrubs through which he had passed. His feet were swollen from long walks on the hot, dry earth and filled with cactus spines. And between weariness, hunger, and thirst, he was so nearly dead that it is doubtful if he would have had the strength enough to reach the station, had he not fallen in with me, almost by miracle, as he did. I always loved children, though I had none of my own. My heart's warmest sympathy was enlisted for this poor, suffering boy. I had some water with me in my canteen, and by the greatest good luck imaginable, a handful of dry soda crackers in my pocket, the remains of my afternoon lunch. He swallowed the water with trembling eagerness, and munched the dry crackers, in spite of his sore mouth, swollen tongue, and bleeding lips, as he rode back to the station behind me on my horse, telling his story. Little by little, as he could collect his thoughts and call to mind the incidents. He was half orphan, his mother having died a year before in Mexico. His father had gone to Alta California 3 years before, leaving him and his mother in Sonora to follow him when his circumstance would warrant sending for them. And on the mother's death, he had written for the boy to come with the first party of friends who might be going over the road to join him in Los Angeles. The party which had been murdered were not relatives, but kind friends. He had become so attached to them that he mourned their fate so deeply as almost to forget his own fearful peril and helpless, lonely condition when he spoke of it, with tears coursing down his sunburned, blistered face and sobs and sighs choking his utterance. Before we reached the station, I had already come to look upon him as my particular charge, a person thrown in my way by Providence, which I was bound to care for and protect, and the idea of adopting him into my family in case I could not find his father in Los Angeles more than once occurred to me. All my traveling companions, save one, a big, rough brute known as Wacko Bill, took a kindly interest in the little unfortunate and consented to my adding him to the party. That night we succeeded in finding him a pair of shoes which would keep his bleeding feet from the sun and the rough rocks of the road, and a blanket to wrap around his shoulders when traveling. And after a hearty meal of the best we could prepare for him in camp, he fell asleep. I had a large black dog, half hound, half mastiff, which had accompanied us on the trip and was very useful in watching the camp and guarding us against the surprise of any Indians. He was as savage as a tiger and could scent an Apache a mile away. Butcher went up to little Manuel. The boy's name was Manuel de la Cruz. As soon as I brought him into camp, and to the surprise of everybody, immediately manifested the warmest friendship for him. Thenceforth, the boy and the dog were almost inseparable companions. That night, Manuel slept near me, with Butcher lying watchfully at his feet, and time after time the little fellow would start up, suddenly reach out his hand to touch me and make sure I was still there. Then, reassured, curled down again under his ample blanket and closed his eyes in slumber. Next morning, I rigged a temporary saddle for my protege, and mounting him on one of my pack mules, installed him as a member of the expedition as we took up our line march again for the Gila. Big Wacko Bill was a tough Texan outlaw who had joined our party more because none of us cared to insist on denying him permission to do so than because any of us really wanted him along. He despised everything Mexican and frequently alluded in no friendly manner that he would kill as many as possible, even whom I had picked up on the road and was taking to California with me. Butcher, who had taken so kindly to Manuel, had hated Bill from the start, and this fact served still more to awaken his anger to the boy. However, we got on pretty well for several days. Manuel, though curiously enough for a boy, a poor rider, and not at all skilled in packing horses, lassoing mules, or similar accomplishments on which his countrymen generally prided themselves, and showed a genuine effort to make himself useful. He was a capital cook, ingeniously adding a number of dishes hitherto unknown to our bill of fare in camp, and with that cheerfully setting himself to work. To me, he was completely devoted, and there was nothing he would not try to do if I asked him. On the other hand, he seemed to shrink instinctively from the presence of Bill, and repaid all the hatred and contempt of that worthy with interest in his own quiet way. His complexion, though his skin was scorched and burned by exposure to the savage desert sun, was much lighter than most of the Mexicans in the working class, and his features indicated pure or nearly pure Spanish descent. He was not strong and quite timid and nervous ordinarily, but in presence of actual danger would suddenly develop genuine pluck and courage, such as constitutes the hero in life. After we reached the Gila, we camped near the Pima villages with the intention of remaining there some 10 days or 2 weeks to thoroughly recruit our animals. One day I had been out with my shotgun after quail and rabbits, leaving Manuel and Butcher in charge of the camp, and returning just before nightfall, heard, while still some distance away, a noisy altercation going on. As I afterward learned, Wacko Bill, who had been off all day, had returned late, half drunk and in a quarrelsome mood. On coming into camp, he had ordered Manuel to go to the river for a pail of water. And the boy, who would have brought it instantly had I but intimidated a wish for him to do so, instead of complying with the command, resented it and kept on with the sewing of a patch on a piece of my clothing that was torn. Bill, infuriated at this, ran toward the boy to seize and punish him. When the latter sprang to his feet and, catching the coffee pot from the coals where it stood simmering, threw it full at him, a portion of the scalding contents striking on the arm and breast and neck, and causing him fairly to howl with rage and pain. As I came in sight, the boy stood a few yards from the fire with a butcher knife, which we used for cutting bacon, in his hand, prepared to defend himself to the death, though trembling from head to foot like a leaf from excitement, while Bill was coming out of the tent with his big Colt 6-shooter in his hand, and malice which would stop nothing short of murder convulsing in his countenance. Butcher, the dog, as if comprehending at a glance the condition of the affairs, dashed forward at Bill as he came out, and the latter, stumbling over him, rolled to the ground. Bill was on his feet again in an instant, more fairly beside himself than ever. But I had by this time reached within striking distance, and seeing that he meant mischief of the murderous description, without a moment's reflection dealt him a blow with my full strength with the butt of my gun, and he went down like a bullock. The blow took effect partly on his neck, and though it brought him down, it did not disable him, and he, still holding his revolver's hand, almost regained to his feet before I could repeat the second blow that broke his right arm near the elbow, causing the pistol to drop from his now powerless hand. And at the same moment the dog, which had made several savage snaps at him, fastened his teeth firmly in the muscle of his leg, to which he hugged for several minutes with a grip like vice, before I could break his hold and release the now helpless and half-dead bully. When the row was all over, and Bill's wounds dressed as well as possible under the circumstances, quite settled down on the camp, when Manuel came and, crouching down on the ground beside me, seized my hand and kissed it, and his voice, half choked with sobs, exclaimed over and over again, "Oh, my father, my friend, my benefactor, why did not the Apaches kill me before I brought this trouble upon you? I would have died for you, and here I have put your life in peril. But, Father of my heart, don't drive me away from you. I will go through fire to serve you. Let me have the opportunity to prove to you my devotion, my eternal gratitude." I was not angry with the boy. How could I be? I told him so again and again, and having quieted him, at least went and consulted with my partners on the situation. They agreed with me that it was best I should leave the party and push on to California ahead. Wacko Bill was disposed of for the time being, but he might recover in a few days sufficiently to do mischief to me. And we all felt sure that it was in his nature to stop at nothing in the way of obtaining revenge. The party could not move on for some 2 weeks, their animals being far more worn down than mine. So I determined to go on alone the next day with Manuel, and trust to luck to fall in with another party on the trail to Fort Yuma. It was a risky venture, but the best we could do under the circumstances. We were off bright and early the next morning. As soon as we were out of sight of the party, Manuel gave a sigh of relief and asked with affecting earnestness, "Will you always be my friend, Captain?" He asked me questions 100 times in the course of the journey down the Gila, receiving the same answer every time. Alone with me, his shyness, which had been so marked while the party disappeared, his spirits rose day by day, and he seemed to almost wholly recover from the terrible shock caused by the butchery of his friends. I had found some cheap clothing at a Pima village, which he had quickly razzed to fit him. And with his glossy black hair, which, when I found him, had the appearance of having been hacked off with a dull knife, neatly cut, his appearance had changed wonderfully. We slept every night at or near one of the old stage stations, and by care and good fortune escaped attack by the Apaches through the whole trip down the Gila to Fort Yuma. At the latter place, we stopped some days to rest and recruit, and waited for a party which was bound inside like ourselves. There were quite a number of Manuel's countrymen and countrywomen here, but he seemed to avoid them all as far as possible, never leaving my company for a moment if he could help it. A priest who happened to be at the post was to say Mass there on Sunday, and Manuel told me with satisfaction beaming on his countenance that we could now say our prayers and thank God and the saints for our escape from the many dangers of our journey. He looked both surprised and pained when I told him that I was not Catholic, and I could not join him in his devotions, but after a moment remarked, "Then with your permission, friend of my heart, I will pray for you." And I am sure that he did so with earnest of a simple, trusting soul and a faith which knew no shadow of doubt. From Fort Yuma to the settlements near Los Angeles, our journey was devoid of special danger or excitement, as we were out of the hostile Indian country and had little to fear from horse thieves even, with such indifferent stock as we traveled with. As we drew near our journey's end, Manuel's spirits began to sink again, and I saw that he looked upon the fast approaching hour when we must separate with sadness and apprehension. As we rode along, he talked with me of my family and my prospects in life. He was particularly anxious to know how he could always be certain of reaching me or hearing from me. When I gave my address, minutely written out, he immediately sewed it into his jacket so that it would not work out and be lost. And I saw him pressing his hand against it over and over again to be sure that he was not mistaken and had it safe. He would indeed like to go on to the great city of San Francisco with me and always be my son. But then his father was old, and would, now that his mother was dead, find it hard to part with him and his sister, of whom he knew little, as he had not seen her for years, would need his protection. So he could not go with me to the great city, but he would never cease to pray for me, and if ever I needed his company or assistance, he would leave his father and sister and all to come to me. I might be sure of that. I looked down into his trusting, tearful eyes, as was for sure of it, and felt more kindly and charitable toward all the world for the assurance. On the last day's journey toward Los Angeles, Manuel hardly talked at all. His mind seemed to be filled with sad thoughts which his tongue could not utter. It was nightfall when we came in sight of the City of Angels, and I realized that my long journey of thousands of miles on horseback from Texas to the shore of the Pacific would soon be over, and I should, in a few minutes more, be in communication with home and wife and friends in San Francisco. Just then, Manuel called me back to the rear of the party, and with a quivering voice told me that I must not think hard of him if he left me immediately on arriving in Los Angeles. His father had not seen him for so long a time that he was in duty bound to seek him out at once. As he said this, he held my hand with an eager, trembling grasp in both his own, and looked up with a longing, mournful expression into my face. I understood and respected his feeling. He wished to bid me goodbye then and there, when no one was looking at us. I bent down from my saddle, and throwing his arms around my neck, he kissed me with energy, and then exclaimed, "Oh, Captain, Captain, am I going to see you no more?" Released me, commenced sobbing convulsively, stopped it with strong effort, then rode forward and rejoined the train without a word. I had no sooner arrived in Los Angeles than I went to the express office and got my letters. Everything was going wrong. My poor wife, whose health had been declining for years, was growing steadily worse. My business was suffering from neglect and need of money, which my partners hoped I would bring from Texas. My trip to Texas had been a failure, for I had found it impossible to sell the greater portion of the lands from which I had expected to realize a handsome sum, and what money I had obtained had nearly all been absorbed in paying taxes on the lands unsold and the expenses of the trip. The steamer would sail from San Pedro the next morning for San Francisco, and I determined to lose no time but go at once, leaving my horse to be sold by a friend as soon as they had so far recovered from the effects of the trip as to be sellable. Manuel had disappeared as soon as we arrived at the hotel, but I felt sure he would come around in good time in the morning and bid me last goodbye. Morning came, but no Manuel. No one had seen him since we rode up to the door of the hotel. The stage for San Pedro was ready, and I reluctantly got upon the box, wondering all the time why Manuel neither came nor sent any word to me. The hostler from the stable came at the last moment to tell me that the dog butcher was also missing. He had howled and acted like a mad creature from the moment that Manuel left, and sometime during the night had gnawed into the rope by which he had been tied in the stable and ran away, no one knew where. They thought he might have gone to find the boy, but no one knew the family of De La Cruz, so they did not know where to look for him. There was no time to wait, and I left, feeling more disappointed than I cared to admit. I had believed that Manuel was a living and triumphant contradiction to the vulgar theory that gratitude has no place in heart, and yet he had deserted me at the first opportunity when there was nothing more to be gained from my friendship, and had even seduced my faithful dog from his allegiance to me. Reflection would suffice to dispel such ideas for the moment, but they came back again and again with redoubled force, and at last I had came to forget them and doubt that such things as disinterested friendship and real gratitude were to be found on earth. My business, by patient care and attention, became prosperous once more, but my dear wife grew daily weaker. Despite all that loving kindness could do for her, and a year after my return, I stood by a newly made grave, alone in the world, still under the middle age, a childish, downcast, disappointed man. Once only during all this time I had heard from Manuel, a Spanish lady well advanced in years, from whose children I had once used my influence with some success, and who thereafter always regarded me both as a friend and a son, returning from Los Angeles, called at my house and said to me, "Captain, I met the sister of your little protege, Manuel, at Los Angeles, and brought you a message from her. She is very grateful to you for what you did for Manuel, and begs you to accept a little gift in token of her regard." In the package I found a pair of fine handkerchiefs, delicately and elaborately embroidered, and bearing the initials M. de la C, and a note in a neat little hand, but in different English. Don't think too much hardly of your little Manuel, who will never forget that you were his friend and benefactor, and will pray for you always. He did not wish to leave you, and sometime you will know why he did. He would not if he could have helped it. Manuela de la Cruz. I was too much occupied with other thoughts and considerations to pay much attention to this. But I had felt glad to learn that Manuel was not ungrateful and was sorry, probably ashamed for having left me so abruptly. After my great loss, I was much alone, and my mind reverted to the subject many times. And the more I thought of it, the more satisfied I became that there was some mystery at the bottom of the whole affair which I had never fathomed. 2 more years passed away, and I heard no more of Manuel and his sister. I drank at the club, gambled now and then in small way at cards, and in short, tried, as lonely, disappointed men will try, to forget the past, kill time in the present, and avoid thinking of the future. One day, I was out riding on the San Bruno Road, in company with a friend. We had both been drinking a little, but only enough to make us feel like driving a trifle more recklessly than usual. As we were coming home along the bay beyond the 7-mile house, we came up with a party who had also had a fast team, and a trial of speed ensued. Just as we were passing them, we rounded a sharp turn in the road, and I saw another team coming from the opposite direction, right before us, not 20 feet off. I had no time to see more. When I regained consciousness, I was lying in the bed in my room on Stockton Street in San Francisco. My leg broken, 3 ribs fractured, and a terrible gash in my scalp, which extended halfway across my head. They said I had narrowly missed instant death, and it probably would, take me 6 months to recover. As good fortune would have it, my old Spanish lady friend had seen me brought in and was attending me. Then the fever came on, and for days I was raving in delirium, or tossing in distempered sleep, which brought no rest or relief. One day I was laying half asleep, half unconscious, with my head as it were on fire, and my ideas all distorted and confused by fever heat, which ran through my brain like molten metal, when I felt a cool, soft hand upon my burning forehead, and the touch of moist, velvety lips on mine. It was some seconds before I was fully awakened to the consciousness, and then I turned my head painfully on my pillow. I saw that there was no one else in the room. I was sure that I could not have been wholly mistaken, and reaching the bell, I rang it for my kind volunteer nurse, who came at once. There was somebody else in the room at a moment since, I said with a positiveness I did not wholly feel, but with a determination to know the truth. Yes, Captain, you were right. Then coming to me, she took my hand and said, if you promise me not to be angry, I will tell you something. I gave the promise. Well, then I have taken the liberty. Manuela, the sister of the boy you found upon the desert, has come to attend upon you now that you are in trouble and need loving care and assistance. But I never saw her in my life, I said. You have seen her brother and been his friend, and for his sake she is devoted to you. But why did not Manuel come? I asked. Their father died recently, and he was detained at home. Hardly knowing what I did, I said, call Manuela in then. The girl came in and stood with cheeks suffused and downcast eyes quietly by my bedside. She was taller than Manuel and of lighter complexion, but had the same glorious eyes of liquid black and same dark hair with the tinge of purple when the sunlight rested on it, the same bright expressive countenance and quick graceful movement of the little tapper hands when speaking. She was very fair to look upon, as the young palm tree by the desert spring, and there was a goodness as well as beauty in her face. From that day I began to mend. Manuela stayed with my nurse, and was ever at my bedside, or ready to come in at my call. Neatness and taste were in all she did, and at her touch all things grew beautiful. She practiced reading English hour after hour, every day to amuse me, profiting at the same time by my lessons. Her hand prepared little dishes to tempt my slowly returning appetite. Her hand arranged the flowers which filled my room with fragrance, and her hand bathed my aching brow, and arranged my pillows when sleep grew heavy upon my eyelids. You can guess the rest. When I was able to sit up once more and to begin to bear my weight upon the broken limb and move about the room with the aid of a crutch and the chairs, I was madly, hopelessly in love, despite the disparity of our years, with Manuela, and determined that she should not leave me if I could prevent it. The time came when she told me that she must go home, that I did not need her care and assistance longer. Then I poured forth all which was in my heart. I told her that I should always need her care and sympathy and assistance, and made her the offer of my hand and heart in all good faith and sincerity, confidence of acceptance. And she accepted you, of course? No, she did not. She broke from me with a startled look, as if something which she had long dreaded had come upon her at last unexpectedly, and answered me proudly but sadly. Love me? Yes, she could love me, did love me, would always love me. She was proud to receive a true man's love and to own that she returned it. But she was an orphan. Their father had died since I left Manuel in Los Angeles. Poor, almost uneducated, and lacking all of what we call the necessary accomplishments. She could not do me credit in society, and would not risk the chance of seeing me regret my folly and feel ashamed of my hasty choice. She loved me too much to make me miserable for life, but would pray for me night and day as the dearest and truest friend she had ever found on earth, and would ask me to continue to love her as a sister or daughter, and believe her worthy of my affection. She had come to prove her gratitude to me and do her duty, not to entrap me into a marriage beneath me, and she wished me to believe it. All this and more she told me, then broke down wholly and wept passionately, rejecting all my attempts to comfort her. She must and would go at once, now that this had happened, and she left me, half stunned, bewildered, and utterly downcast at this crushing blow, to make the arrangements for her journey back to Los Angeles. My other nurse came in soon after, with her eyes full of tears, but I could not talk, even to her, of the great sorrow which had come upon me. It was too sacred for others than Manuela and I to speak of, even though, as I suspected, she knew it all. That night, I never closed my eyes in sleep. I formed 1,000 plans, but abandoned each. In turn, and impractical, feeling that if Manuela had decided on her course, nothing would turn her from it. Manuela came in the afternoon to bid me goodbye. She was pale, sad, and silent. She took my hand, and I no longer was able to express my emotion, turned my head away in speechless agony. She stood a moment irresolute, and then, in an instant, a wondrous change swept over her. Her arms were round my neck, her head was upon my bosom, and her warm tears falling thick and fast upon my hands. When at last she looked up into my face and said, "I thought that I was doing my duty, and I had strength to bear it, and go away alone. But I cannot part with you again." Again, I repeated inquiringly. Yes, my true friend, my only friend, again. The first time was at Los Angeles. I am the little Manuel whom you found on the Arizona desert and cared for and protected at the risk of your life. God brought us together then, and now again for some good purpose, and I will not leave you any more. You know all now, and I will be your loving wife to honor and to serve you always, if you will desire it. She said this with trembling eagerness. In truth, I wished it. Then she explained how she had come to deceive us in Arizona, and so long kept up the deception. There was a boy in the party, somewhat older than herself. She was 14 then, and when the Indians charged upon the camp, she was sitting in the shade a little distance away, mending some of his clothes. When she realized her companions and protectors were no more, and the full horror of her situation broke upon her mind, instinct told her that her chances of safety would be better with whoever she might meet if she donned the costume of the other sex, which she lost no time in doing. When we reached Los Angeles, she hurried away to meet her father before the secret of her sex should be discovered by others, and succeeded in assuming again her proper costume, without the story becoming known to anyone but him. Meeting our mutual friend, my old Spanish nurse, she had confided the whole story to her, and she kept the secret as well. God bless her. The dog butcher was hunting for Manuel for 2 days and recognized Manuela in his place the moment that he found her. He was with her still and is with us now. That is his Lark, the noble old fellow. This is my ranch. That is our house under the trees up there at the entrance of the canyon yonder. And that is Manuela, God bless her, coming down the gateway to meet with us. Little Manuel and Manuela by her side. I tell you what it is, old friend. I am just the happiest man in California and the most contented. I went in with him, and there in the quiet summer evening, when the whole air was fragrant with the breath of flowers, I saw him sitting beneath his own vine and fig tree, with his bright-eyed, laughing children on his knees, and Manuela, whose fair face was radiant with love and pride, leaning trustingly on his shoulder, as one who knows whence comes the strength which, through all trials, shall sustain her. And I did believe him. What a great, awesome love story. Only the one that can be made in the mad Wild West. Hope you enjoyed it.